This year, the real tough cream puff is having his 20th birthday, and what a duo of decades it has been. Ever since his monochromatic debut, Kirby has defined himself as one of Nintendo's most charming franchises, and certainly HAL Laboratory's most prolific character. Whether he was flying through the air, blowing up giant clock comets, or spinning himself into a yarn tank, Kirby has done it in style. Kirby had established himself as a great Nintendo character through the Game Boy, Nintendo, and Super Nintendo. By 1997, he had seen large single-player adventures, jam-packed cavalcades, and a number of different spin-offs all around. However, as the Super Nintendo winded down, where would Kirby end up? Kirby and the Rest of Dreamland became hand-drawn in the November 1997 release, Kirby's Dream Land 3. In Kirby's Dream Land 3, dark matter comes back to Pop Star, destroying the planet's rings and quickly spreading its dark influence around the world. Just like its predecessor, Kirby has help from his friends, but now he has 3 more friends. Nago the cat, Pitch the bird, and Choo Choo the blob, or octopus, I can't really tell. Much like in Dreamland 2, these new friends use Kirby's copy abilities in wholly unique ways. Furthermore, cooperative gameplay from Kirby Superstar returns in Dreamland 3, this time in the form of a blue blob named Gooey. He technically appeared in Dreamland 2, but this time he is available to play, complete with his long tongue and globular appearance. Kirby's Dream Land 3 drops the rainbow drops from Dreamland 2 in favor of heart stars, manifestations of happiness which can be used to cleanse the world of dark matter's influence. In order to gather heart stars, though, Kirby and company have to complete a variety of missions in each world, ranging from helping flowers grow to finding a missing person to completing subgames. At times, players have to complete a level with a specific helper, and other times you have to collect items or break blocks the right way to please the person in need. Anyone who has not played the game before is bound to have a little trouble figuring what to do, especially when there are so few in-game clues for most of the missions. Still, the missions give a bit more variety to the levels beyond the basic Kirby game framework, not to mention there are plenty of throwbacks in the occupants. Who knew Kirby and Metroid were in the same game universe? Actually, that makes the Metroid franchise weirder for it. Either way, like in Dreamland 2, every heart star is needed to face off the final boss, but the game's ending is worth it. The game itself was received with mixed reviews, particularly coming so soon after the massive success of Superstar. It felt odd to step back to the simple design of earlier Kirby games. Still, the unique design and multiple heart star goals make it hard to dislike it for long. One thing is certain, Kirby's Dream Land 3 has one of the most charming art styles in the series. It just didn't have the same oomph compared to that of Superstar. After the release of Kirby's Dream Land 3, the pink puffball took a break from major appearances. Nintendo was moving from the Super Nintendo to the new Nintendo 64, but Kirby would not see a game on the system for quite some time. Why wasn't Sakurai working on a follow-up to Superstar or any Kirby game for the Nintendo 64? Well, he was working on a couple games, notably At the same time, HAL was struggling with development on the new hardware, causing numerous delays of their games. Kirby Bowl 64, a racing game with a similar style to Kirby's Dream Course, was one of the first unveiled Nintendo 64 titles, but even after many changes to the game, and even a name change to Kirby's Air Ride, the game was cancelled. Earthbound 64 and Jack and the Beanstalk were also failed projects, delaying HAL even further. It would take Super Smash Bros., Pokemon Stadium, and Pokemon Snap to propel HAL out of its slump, and from there eventually emerged the next Kirby adventure. Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards released in the US mid-2000s, and while it would retain Kirby's side-scrolling tropes, it brought it into a third dimension, complete with shifting camera angles and a more interactive environment. In Kirby 64, the peaceful planet of Ripplestar becomes the latest victim of the still-living dark matter. In an effort to protect the fairy's great treasure, the crystal, small fairy Ribbon rushes out with it in order to get help, only for dark matter to shatter the crystal, scattering its pieces across the galaxy. Thankfully for Ribbon, she crash lands in front of Kirby. Kirby is all too content to help gather the pieces for her, and once he saves his friends from dark matter's remnants, the whole crew goes out on an adventure to save Ripplestar and rid the galaxy of dark matter once and for all. Kirby 64 mixes up the gameplay a little from its predecessors. For one, the cooperative gameplay element has been removed in favor of a fully single-player experience, save a number of mini-games played alongside the adventure. The number of copy abilities has remained small in number, but to compensate, powers can now be combined into one fearsome attack. Combining Fire and Cutter yields a Flame Sword, whereas Needle and Cutter turn Kirby into a giant bear trap. These present a multitude of unique attacks for Kirby throughout the adventure. I mean, I don't think many expected Kirby to become a refrigerator, but there he is. Kirby can even combine two of the same power to get a highly powerful version of the same ability. Using these combinations of powers is necessary if you want to collect all the crystal shards in the game. There are 3 located in each level, and some of them are located not far from the main path, while others are sealed off by special blocks. the right combination of powers is necessary to break open those blocks, but it can be a challenge to even get to those blocks with certain powers. Gone are the animal friends from the Dreamland series, and in their place are Waddle Dee, Adeline, and King Dedede himself. Waddle Dee helps Kirby traverse across long stretches of land, snow, and water, and he sometimes helps Kirby bust through ceilings and walls. Adeline uses her magic brush to paint clues for Kirby to decipher and gather more hidden crystal shards, and she occasionally provides healing items to help him out at pivotal times. Meanwhile, King Dedede uses his brawn to launch Kirby to other locations, and he occasionally gives piggyback rides to traverse through more difficult areas of the game. Upon its release, Kirby 64 received a mixed reception, as many felt the series had not evolved with the fanbase, nor did it reflect the ideas developed over the last few games. Still, the depth of the combo ability system was welcome, and it separated it from other platformers on the system. Whether it was received well or not, Kirby 64 would be the last console platformer from HAL for quite a few years. As the Nintendo GameCube and Game Boy Advance rapidly approached off the end of Kirby 64's release, Nintendo and HAL would release yet another spin-off for Kirby, but not on the new handheld. Instead, Kirby's Tilt and Tumble would be released in mid-2001 for the Game Boy Color. In this adventure, Kirby is resting when he spots a Waddle Dee and subsequently King Dedede carrying large objects nearby. Figuring that something must be up, Kirby runs off to make chase, and he quickly discovers that Dreamland has lost all of its stars, so he must fight to get them back. In Kirby's Tilt and Tumble, players do not control Kirby in a normal fashion. Rather than use buttons to move him around, players tilt the Game Boy Color to move Kirby in that direction, thanks to a special motion control chip inside the cart. Flipping the handheld up will launch Kirby into the air, allowing him to traverse onto clouds and collect airborne items. Flipping also causes certain changes to switches and enemies, which leads to a number of puzzles to solve. Over the course of the game, new obstacles are introduced, such as quicksand, from which Kirby cannot jump, and grates, which allow Kirby to roll underneath walls and enemies. At the end of each world, Kirby enters a dark castle, and even though Kirby does not move normally, the game still expects him to fight against mysterious bosses. The game is initially linear in nature, and players will get the best ending by finding each level's secret star, provided they don't run out of time in the process. Once you collect the bonus star, you're given the ability to choose a mini-game to play, including a tilt-based dance game. Tilt and Tumble was successful enough that a sequel was considered and even demonstrated in Space World 2001, shown off by none other than Shigeru Miyamoto. The game was to use the Game Boy Advance as a controller and represent the lower area of the world, whereas the GameCube and TV would represent the upper level. The game itself went through multiple changes, shifting over to a new IP, Rollorama, in E3 2002, but even so, the game disappeared and will likely never return. At the start of the century, Kirby was becoming quite a popular guy, and in 2001, Nintendo and HAL would create Warp Star Inc., a company which would handle Kirby merchandising and copyright issues. Half owned by Nintendo and half owned by HAL, it started to create a number of Kirby products in Japan, which also led to the creation of Kirby Right Back At Ya, an animated series starring Kirby and a slew of new characters. A number of elements from the series would integrate themselves into the games, and vice versa. And it would be used heavily to push both Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland and the next title in our retrospective. Leading up to the end of 2001, Masahiro Sakurai was busily working on Super Smash Bros. Melee, adding many characters, stages, and game modes. After its massive success, though, Sakurai was brought back to the Kirby franchise to bring back the failed Nintendo 64 racer, Kirby Air Ride. Released in 2003, Kirby Air Ride is a 3-game racer starring different colored Kirbys, all aimed toward victory. However, unlike just about every other racer out there, Kirby Air Ride does not feature an acceleration button. Instead, Kirby accelerates continually forward, and pressing the A button causes him to brake, drift, inhale enemies, and even use abilities he's received. At times, the star that Kirby is riding can glide through the air, allowing him to avoid obstacles or maneuver more easily around turns. What complicates the game is the sheer variety of each of the game's vehicles. Each star has a unique element to them, ranging from a star that accelerates faster in the air to a wagon which does not charge but moves smoothly. Finding the right star for your playstyle is key to victory. Of course, the game is a bit more than a single-button racer. It is actually 3 racers in one. Air Ride is the most straightforward, asking for players to race across 9 unique tracks with their select ships. During each race, finding the right moments to drift is pivotal, and chaos builds once someone grabs copy abilities, as long as that person didn't just grab the sleep ability. Kirby can also make use of vines and long rails to grind on for more speed. The levels are also filled with multiple paths, which can help or hinder Kirby's progress to the goal. The second game, Top Ride, is a top-down racer akin to Off-Road, but despite the smaller tracks, the intensity can get very high. Unlike the other 2 modes, you can choose between a star that can steer or one in which you move directly. Power boosts and attacks fly onto the stage, and each track explodes with activity as it progresses, ensuring a hectic but short race around the screen. The third game, City Trial, puts players in a sprawling city with but a basic vehicle. After a set time, the game pits the Kirbys against one another in unique challenges. In order to ensure victory in those challenges, the Kirbys have to wander the city and collect power-ups, or even brand new vehicles to fit the challenge ahead. The city is full of power boosts, and players can even choose to attack and destroy each other to sabotage them before the challenge begins. At the same time, random events can create more havoc for players as they rush to build themselves higher, not to mention that there are very powerful vehicles they can find in the city, such as the fabled Dragoon. Just make sure not to lose track of time looking for it. All the while, the game tracks what you do in every race, and there is a vast grid of achievements to complete in order to unlock more content in the game. Despite what extra content the game had, though, it was met with mixed reception. Its simple gameplay put it behind other racers on GameCube, and it was considered a throwaway title in the end. Kirby Air Ride might be seen positively with some, but to Sakurai, the game was the last straw for him as a director at HAL. After seeing HAL working too heavily on sequels, he resigned from the company, and a few days later, he explained his stance in an interview with Nintendo Dream. It was tough for me to see that every time I made a new game, people automatically assumed that a sequel was coming. Even if it's a sequel, lots of people have to give their all to make a game, but some people think the sequel process happens naturally. Satoru Iwata was able to talk with Sakurai and make the departure more amiable, and it was through this that Sakurai would eventually return to help create more Nintendo-published titles. Still, he never would return to Kirby directly. HAL had to continue working on Kirby without Sakurai anymore, and while it worked on creating a new console adventure, the company turned to the Game Boy Advance for their next Kirby release. Capcom developer Flagship and Dimps would assist HAL to create a completely new concept for Kirby, a full Metroidvania experience. The concept will be realized in Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, which launched October 2004 in the US. Kirby and the Amazing Mirror takes place in a mirror world, which reflects wishes of people to make them come true. But when it starts to only grant evil wishes, Meta Knight decides to investigate. A short time later, a dark Meta Knight emerges from the mirror world and attacks Kirby. In a series of attacks, Kirby is split into 4 differently colored Kirbys, and they are all sucked into the mirror world. With the mirror world filled with evil monsters and a twisted visage, it's up to the Kirbys to work together to help save the sprawling mirror world and, subsequently, their own. In order to save the original Meta Knight and mirror world, Kirby has to collect the 8 fragments of the mirror which have been scattered across the world, guarded by beings which are quite uncanny to Dreamland's inhabitants. Now, different from the previous games in Kirby's franchise, Amazing Mirror is designed as a wide labyrinth, complete with 9 massive interconnected worlds and multiple branching paths and doorways. Unlike most exploratory platformers, however, there are multiple Kirby-esque puzzles, and there are a multitude of one-way doors, making exploration sometimes more complicated than some might expect. To circumvent this issue, Kirby can hit switches to open doorways which connect to the main hub of the game, making the world even more interconnected than before. While the goal of the game is to ultimately collect the 8 fragments and defeat the evil beings involved, Amazing Mirror offers a multitude of treasures to find and areas to explore too. It certainly makes those gamers with OCD twitch a little more, that's for sure. Besides a large-scale world, Amazing Mirror has a few more unique traits in its arsenal. For one, the game is built for cooperative play, whether you're alone or with friends. Those with multiple copies of the game can play cooperatively as much as they want, exploring the world together, and those who are alone can grab assistance from 3 AI partners. Using the cell phone, Kirby can call for a star to bring him back to the hub if he's lost, or he can call as many Kirbys as possible to help him assist in fighting enemies or inhaling large blocks in the way. Results tend to vary though, but they tend to help most of the time. Also, the game adds a handful of new copy abilities, with the most significant being the Smash ability. This provides Kirby with the ability to use his cutter, hammer, and stone abilities together, as if he was in Super Smash Bros. It also confirms Master Hand as a canon character for Kirby, which is pretty neat. In the end, Amazing Mirror received mostly positive reviews, seeing it as a unique twist in the Kirby concept, even if the layout was a bit unwieldy. Flagship would continue to work with Nintendo and HAL on another Kirby game, but not before HAL released its own unique entry in the series. But if you want to find out what that game is, check out our final part of the Kirby Retrospective.